I am Jerusalem. I am Jerusalem wars and conflicts, which have caused great pain to nature and humans. This holy city was destroyed and repopulated many times. But even today, Jerusalem holds a unique place in people's hearts. Jerusalem is the strangest city in terms of its geographical location. This city is located on a mountainous plain, which spans from the Jezreel Plain to the Aqsa, which is surrounded by mountains in the south and east. Historical records show that there was no famine in Jerusalem, while this city has existed for 3,000 years. The barren valleys of the city take the form of a fertile and natural valley. There are many names of Jerusalem. Different nations have given it different names in different periods. Its oldest name is Jebus. According to Jewish literature, Abraham called this city Jerah. And later, a king named Shalem was added to it. Thus, the combination of two Hebrew words, Yeru and Shalem, this city was called Jerusalem. In addition, the Arabs also gave it the name of the Golden City. Because when the sun would rise, the houses made of golden stones would shine with its rays. When the Romans came here, they gave it the name of Elia. In this way, the Muslim rulers named it Al-Quds. The Jews and Christians accepted the name Jerusalem. And in this way, it is still called Jerusalem. In the human memories, no place in the world is older than the Holy House. According to the beliefs of the people of the book, Elia is the land through which man is freed from sins. This is the place from where the universe was created. According to the Hadith, in Jerusalem, Adam or any of his sons had set foot first. As the Prophet Muhammad has said, the first mosque on the face of the earth is Masjid al-Haram. And 40 years after that, the foundation of the Holy House was laid. But probably at that time, human population had not spread in Jerusalem. According to history, the first people to settle here were the sons of Sam, the son of Noah, who settled in 2500 BC. They were called Canaanites. That is why Jerusalem is called the land of Canaan in ancient history. Then in the time of 2000 BC, Prophet Abraham migrated from Iraq to Jerusalem and reached this area and settled in the place of Hebron. According to the traditions of the Holy Book and Ibn Kathir, the king of Jerusalem at that time, Shalem, believed in Prophet Abraham. And thus, the power of Prophet Abraham increased in Hebron. 40 years later, the great-grandson of Abraham, i.e. Jacob, saw God in a dream at this place. Therefore, he built the Temple of Il at this place, which is considered the first holy place of the pharaohs. The Holy Land, which was to be given to the Israelites. At that time, the number of Israelites was more than 700,000. The Israelites could not enter Palestine in the life of Moses, but after him, under the leadership of his successor, Hazrat Yusha bin Nun, the Israelites fought the Amalekites and they were victorious. Thus, the Israelites again settled in the desert areas of Palestine. Until the time of the king of David, the Bani Israel was under the control of the Habaruan because the Amalekites still ruled the central city of Jerusalem. So, David attacked Jerusalem with a huge army of 200,000 men and defeated the Amalekites and included Jerusalem in his government. This is where the great political history of Jerusalem begins. During the reign of Prophet David, the neighboring cities of Jerusalem also made peace with the Israelites. David established high-rise buildings all around Jerusalem and large springs were dug. Gardens were planted in the rocky valleys and a temple was built in the place. In this place, large palaces, rooms and palaces were built. It took 13 years for the completion of the Temple of Solomon. Now Jerusalem was declared the capital of the Israelites. And the city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built in the splendor of the city. The city was built and the splendor increased. Hundreds of rivers were dug in the city, roads were paved, and thus Jerusalem became the most beautiful and great commercial center of its time. Experts claim that at that time Jerusalem was connected to the world's greatest civilizations and cities, including the Sindh Valley, Egypt, Persia, and Mesopotamia. The people of Jerusalem used to trade in the Sindh Valley cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro for gold, silver, ivory, pears, spices, and cotton. After the glorious reign of Suleiman the Great, the Israelites gradually became rebellious and disobedient. They changed the Torah, killed the prophets, made idols of Jehovah, and started idolatry, and were involved in all kinds of crimes, such as incest, adultery, etc. Therefore, under their disobedience, the enemy forces attacked Jerusalem several times, and in this long history of 1,000 years, Jerusalem was completely destroyed and re-inhabited for about 17 times. The attacks of King of Egypt Shishak, King of Ashuri Sekarb, King of Babylon Bubnasar in 500 BC, General of Alexander the Great in 300 BC, General of Secapus and Roman General Titus in 70 AD were devastating attacks. Jerusalem and the people living here suffered the most. In that attack, the temple was completely destroyed. The Torah was burned. The Israeli women were taken prisoner. The city was massacred. All the wealth and resources of the Jews were looted. And all the great neighborhoods and buildings of Jerusalem was part of the Byzantine Empire, i.e. the Christian government. And then in the 5th century AD, with the advent of Islam, a new chapter begins in the history of Jerusalem. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, went on a journey to Israel and Miraj in the 7th year of his prophethood. During this time, he, peace and blessings be upon him, reached the holy house from the Haram Mosque and led the prayer of all the prophets to pray. And then from this place, they boarded the boat and set off on a journey of 7 skies. In this way, with the Kaaba and the Prophet's Mosque, Jerusalem's holy house attained the highest rank of Islam. In the 16th Hijri, that is, 236th of Eid, in the Caliphate of Hazrat Umar bin Khattab in Jerusalem became part of the Islamic Sultanate. In 86 Hijri, the Umayyad Caliph Abdul Malik bin Marwan built the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Caliph of Abbas Mansur repaired the mosque. After the Muslims conquered Jerusalem, many Arab tribes came there and became peaceful. And in a short time, Jerusalem became a purely Arab area. Until the Caliphate of Banu Abbas, Jerusalem was a part of the Islamic State. But as the Caliphate began to weaken, in 1099 AD, the Crusaders took the Holy Temple from the Muslims, and in Jerusalem, the blood of the Muslims was shed. This city remained under the control of the Crusaders for 88 years. And finally, Saladin fought 16 wars for the freedom of Qibla and liberated Jerusalem in 1187. After Saladin, Jerusalem remained a part of the Islamic Empire for about 700 years. Where the Turkish Ottomans gave a lot of development to this city, the doors of the city were always open for Jews and Christians.